Welcome back to Highway Through Health. We're not a crisis line, we're not a therapy show, and we're not licensed healthcare providers. What we are is a place where lived experience is taken seriously because too many people have discovered the more clearly they speak, the worse they're treated. We share personal experience not to give medical advice, but so that when people encounter the kinds of situations we discuss, they're ready to recognize patterns and respond effectively. This show is about language, power, and what happens when systems stop listening and start translating people into problems. If you've ever felt misheard, mislabeled, or punished for staying coherent under pressure, you're in the right place. Hey,
Hey, how are you?
good. How are you doing?
All right, good to see you.
Yeah, what a day. What a week. How
That's
have you
great.
been?
I've been good. Still got the hot trots. Lucky me eating that peach. Um,
Man, sorry to
but
hear that.
yeah, it's okay. Hey, I might get a 20-pound weight loss out of it. I ain't gonna bitch. Plus, I
There's
get
always,
all the joy of trying the rainbow flavors of Pedialyte. I have to say,
yeah.
it's been a
There's always an upside in there somewhere, right?
you gotta find something. You gotta find
Something.
something. That's for sure. So
Yeah, definitely.
been keeping the groceries to a dull roar too. So that there's nothing wrong with that. And
Right.
kind of
Give a little
reminds me
break
to
there too.
yeah, kind of reminds me to keep. I think Pedialyte's probably a good thing just for my heart problems in general, and even with the dealing with lupus flare ups, sometimes that can be having those
Oh,
electrolytes. And
yeah.
this one has like immune support. I forget what they call it, but additional things in there for immune support. And
Oh, that's nice.
yeah, I was glad I found it, and I thought, you do learn something new all the time. So just in
Mm-hmm.
kind of doing a little bit of shopping, I thought, it's probably not a bad idea to kind of keep some of that handy for those
Yeah.
times. You know.
I still buy insurers by the case.
Yeah, I
So,
found those to be particularly helpful, and I always have like protein drinks, so I started getting a lot of the Atkins shakes. So I was
uh-huh.
having those for and when I was having seizures, I couldn't eat at all. So my choices sometimes were even just holding down baby food.
Yeah.
Anything that baby food, peanut butter. I started getting into eating this stuff called nuts and more, which I'm crazy about, and
Mm-hmm.
I found it to be that even for people, if they're whether they're losing weight or trying to keep it on, you want the most nutrient dense stuff. And if you can't barely eat it all, again, you still want some of that most nutrient dense stuffs to make sure that you're getting your nutrition in.
Right.
And having that, so whether it's one thing or another, and if somebody's just trying to either maintain weight or whatever, that's always your best option. And really just nutritionally, that's your best option, because when you
Yeah.
get the nutrients, you do feel full. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily have that mindfulness about their eating, about how that satiation comes from having, like, keto, certainly having the fats. I use a lot of seasonings and flavor, and
Uh-huh.
that makes a big difference. So
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I don't think people realize you get into some of those flares, you can't eat. You're sick. And the medication on top of it is horrific and it adds to the to just the overall nausea. And I mean, I've went to restaurants and ordered food and just sat there and stared at it
yeah,
and
I've
can't
done that too.
swallow it. So, you know, you do get to a point where you can drink a couple bottles of Ensure and actually see some, some bulk coming back on your body. I mean, there are events like that you end up having to go through, and it's it's just part of the thing that people
Yeah,
don't see that much. much, but we deal with it, and we
Yeah.
tend to just deal with it and shut up about it and move on to the next thing because
Yeah.
it's not the worst thing. It
Right.
sucks, but in the whole, wide breadth of experience, I guess that's just one of another many things on down the line that I think that's what really kind of pushes us down into that process mentality where you just, you
Yes.
know, okay, here we go again.
That's
Now
it.
what's going to happen, and you know what's going to get thrown at you. You know how the game works. You know how to push back against it. You know that you're going to push, push, push. You don't know when it's going to break through, but at some point there's going to be a breakthrough, and you're going to win. And that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's being prepared for that kind of thing, and it's something that's long always been in the back of my mind. And even when I was caregiving for my adopted mother, it was the same thing. It was like always just trying to be prepared for when
yeah,
things go a bit cattywampus, one thing or another, and that poor woman was on so many medications that just really did her health in. And had I known
mhm,
then what I know now, I could have advocated differently for both of us. But you learn as you go. Um,
yeah,
but I mean, even just for myself, knowing that, yeah, sometimes my heart acts up. Yeah, sometimes my nerve damage acts up. I've got brain
mhm,
damage to deal with now on top of everything else. So it's just a matter, and then knowing what lupus flares do and how awful they can be, because they can just be outsized, and uh,
yeah,
but it's a matter of, like, taking notes, being prepared, just doing the best that I can, and sort of applying all that to the brain damage situation as well, and just
mhm,
saying, I got to get on with it. I can put it into perspective. I can get on with it. It's way better than having to deal with all the psych shit. That's for sure. That's for
yeah,
sure.
for real.
Yeah.
And that's what I guess when I was going through all those churches of Revelation this week, it kind of really hit me that we do have to practice in a really in a hostile environment. I mean, I've been threatened. Well, I've got a court transcript. I've been threatened with
Right.
being locked up if I talk about it.
Yes.
Things like spacemen, which is the best way I could describe that picture that I have. I
Right.
mean, come on, it's
Right.
like um, it's so. I guess they don't really understand how much you have to push back, and that finally, when that thing happens, when crossover experience happens, why it's so magnificent and why you have to be so internally stable to even appreciate it is because it's so magnificent. It's breathtaking beyond words, and you have to take that in, and you only have so much time to take it in, right? Because I mean, I was there for a little while, then boom, out again. And
Yes.
I mean, it leaves an indelible mark on you, but that doesn't mean that, I mean, here I am 12 years on still processing it. It's not at all surprising in my mind why the Apostle Paul spent between 9 and 12 years processing his light beam event on the road to Damascus before he started out on that, on his missionary journeys that would eventually cost him his life, get him stoned, have people throwing stuff at him, imprisoned, all the things that he went through just to bring that message to people. He had to get ready for that. And you do have to, it's surprising. You think, oh, I can just, it's like reading an article in the paper. No, it's not. It goes and incorporates down into your very what you are. I mean, I guess maybe you could describe it better than me. I don't know. That's what
Yeah,
I feel.
for me, I mean, it was like also an extensive sort of thing. And I knew, and eventually I really knew that from my last lifetime, because I had clocked out early, I had committed suicide last lifetime. So I still
Mhm.
had some of that residue on me in this one. You could put it that way. Um, and just that feeling of just discomfort in general. And it was really in being able to read about a lot of things with past life regression, hypnotherapy, and all, as the more certain things were kind of coming together for me. Because when that happened to me in '03, I really had felt uh, like, and that was when God had asked me, do you want to go back? And I said, I just don't know. And it really was because I felt like there was already a completion of certain things. And to a degree, there was my completion of obligation to both my dad and to my adopted mother. That felt very complete. That felt very much like I had closed the chapter because she had passed I knew earlier the year prior. She had passed the year prior in '02. And I felt like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'm done. But the thing that kept me coming back was actually my cat. And actually, when I came back to, Arthur was like grabbing on my shoulder. He literally had tears coming down his face. I've never seen this happen on a cat before, but it was happening then. And like I said, my own body at that point, I was so racked with pain constantly and just everything else. But it took me a while to kind of put things together and the way things kind of came together, because as I was starting to understand consciousness, and then all the things I had to go through with Mr. X, the minder I was sold to, because you would think, and no wonder God said to me, "Are you sure?" When I said about coming back, no wonder I didn't realize like all that, and and reading some of the things that Dolores Cannon talked about, that's when that split started to happen between the two worlds, from 3D to 5D consciousness, and that's what they were talking about with Revelations, and she had kind of mentioned that too, and how that comes together in her work. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I don't believe in coincidence, so of course that happened in '03. But then just knowing like certain things that I'd already kind of been picking up on, that I was putting together from my last lifetime, this lifetime, how dreams and frequency and vibration are a part of consciousness, how your energy is eternal, consciousness is eternal. And knowing, like, for example, like I had one at a time when all this was happening with the seizures and all, and I had this very vivid dream of sitting down with Rob Reiner and his father Carl in an airport, and Carl was getting ready to go somewhere. And we were talking. We were in front of a McDonald's of all things, and who knows why McDonald's is in there. But and we were talking. It was very sweet, and I found out like a couple days later that's actually when Carl Reiner had passed. He had passed on that day. And I thought, wow, I think this is maybe, because he was saying he was going to take a trip, he was going on a plane, and you think planes of existence and planes of consciousness. And I thought, oh, wow. And the last day that, because I couldn't handle anymore, and I knew also from the time that, and I think we've gone into this before, like they had deliberately ignored my do not resuscitate orders at Hopkins, and then they were purposely experimenting on me after that. And there was all this fraudulence and all, and I knew that. And they weren't helping me leave, and I knew there were ulterior motives behind that. And it's very disturbing, but and I knew that when I died from the heart issue in 2023, and they took me to they're trying to cover their tracks by transferring a hospital. It's not just me this happens to, it's a lot of people. But then having the forced brain damage with the electrocutions over my will and wishes. And I knew there was weird stuff going on then too. And forcing me to, once again, return to an abuser who was a minder and, all this. But when I finally did decide to leave him, because I couldn't take it anymore. And what I said was, as I was getting ready to go out the door, because nobody was letting me, everything was hospital, because they had this false narrative built around me. And I just grabbed a bag of stuff and I said, fuck you, I'm leaving. I'm going to visit my friend Shelley. And in my head, somehow I was thinking of Shelley Duvall. And I said, I don't care if I got to live in a car. She gets what I'm talking about. She knows. And he calls, one of the wonderful people that had stolen my identity and everything else. And they forced me to go to hospital yet again, instead of actually fucking helping me leave. And it was within that time frame is when I found out she had passed away.
Wow.
So there's, I knew there was something more going on, and I had known that for a while. And I knew that's what they were studying. And then, like I said, finding out that Hopkins has already been in trouble for doing funny business with the consciousness studies that they've been doing. And it had to do with clergy. It had to do with things about spirituality that they had been popped on for misusing.
Right.
And I don't know the specifics. That hasn't come out, but I do know that happened in 2024, the same time that they were caught giving medical records to the Russians. And I have no doubt mine were probably among them. I'd found Russian writing on my old tablet that had gotten stolen. So I knew there was other things going on, but that consciousness, I knew too that at a point I had to overcome the whole suicidal ideation thing. My part of my job was to stay here through this. And part of what my assignment basically in this lifetime was to be able to understand all this and bump up against these certain powers who are doing wrong. So being able to put that in that context and framework, knowing that we have been persecuted for our spiritual beliefs, seeing how we have this rise in anti-Semitism now, how we have a rise in phony baloney prosperity Christianity. It's nothing of the sort. Nothing what Jesus taught, that's for sure.
No.
And all of this is just sort of coming together at this point, and it's like, okay, when I'm able to put it into that perspective, when I'm able to kind of explain that to people and explain that at the time all of this with the seizures was happening and the whole false narratives really started to get way out of control, is when I was having a more deep understanding of how my past life connected to this life, how all time is now, and we are each a piece and an aspect of God represented in these meat suits. And it really became very, very clear to me. And I was trying to connect with the people I knew were within my soul family. And the more I tried to do that, the more they really were trying to just completely decimate my life into a million pieces and literally torturing me. They really turned it up to 11. And I'm horrified that I went through it, but at least I understand it. And I feel like I'm able to explain it because we did see it with the apostles. St. Stephen was stoned to death, which they say he fell asleep. So that kind of speaks to levels of consciousness too. It's not that he died, it's he fell asleep. Joan of Arc burned at the stake. So, and then you had the witch trials, which was probably also somewhat about people coming into a greater understanding and women in particular being able to have a certain amount of power. So history always repeats, and it feels like, we're at a point with Action T4 being modern day. The Nazis certainly misused sacred knowledge and occult knowledge to further their evil goals and their eugenics goals. And we're just seeing that again on a global scale. And no one should ever be surprised. Evil is always present in the world because we live on a free will planet. And you don't ever eliminate it. It scatters into dark corners and finds a way to kind of come back up, but good will always win. So when you think of a yin yang symbol, you have times where darkness is a little bit more present, but then you follow that down, and almost like you see with the infinity symbol, you come to that middle part, and then you see the good conquering that again. So that's where I feel like where we are right now. And as you were discussing too with the 7 churches in Revelations, we have 7 colors in a rainbow. So we have 7 aspects of certain things. Jesus said to forgive 7 times, 7 times. So and the 7 deadly sins. So as we've been able to confront that within ourselves, that's what makes it effective to stand up to that when we see it in other people or in institutions. And that's where we've needed to be. And that's why I believe we're having the spiritual awakening right now, because so many people are becoming aware of the greater picture and feeling
Yeah.
ability to have the understanding of God like we're supposed to, and not through a third party, not filtered through some kind of lens of somebody who wants some sort of, bizarre power or materialistic egoic goal, but
Right.
through each of us as individuals realizing that we are each a piece of God, and each of us has a mission to accomplish, and things we're put here to do. You know,
Yeah, I agree. And it's I got into Jerry Marzinsky's website a little bit deeper, and I think it's engineering mental sanity. I goofed that up from our last call. But anyway, you look at this when you listen to him talk about entities and this list of lies that whisper to the schizophrenics that he's talking to, and in his mind, he's not dealing with people that have a brain injury. He's dealing with people that are on have somehow, for some reason, some way, shape, or form, tapped into a demonic wavelength that their body receives. They pick up, they argue with it, they go back and forth with it. But as long as we put this stuff into a pathology, you're never going to give the people the tools to overcome it, because when you look at that list of those lies, they're hateful, they're visceral, they're attacking, they are well, there's probably 30 or 40 of them in that long list. And what he does is work in a spiritual sense to overcome that. I guess there's some technique that they've developed where you can take those one at a time, do some visualization things with them and smash them and never be bothered by him again. But you have to have a spiritual openness within you that's bigger than those lies that are listed on, I think it's posted in Common Rebellion too. And I hear people repeating those in a lot of places, in a lot of ways, in a lot of shapes and forms. And I know they're tormented by them, but and to get over them though, we can't keep sitting here doing this thing where every spiritual experience is psychosis, is
right?
a disease, is a court actionable event, or it's some kind of a medical emergency that we have to give complete custody of a person over to someone who has zero knowledge of your life, what you've been through, what's going on, what you're
Yeah,
faced with, or not only, and even those people, if you even try and tell them a little bit about that, they're not going to listen anyway because they've already made up their mind, because they're going to
yeah,
put the whole thing, they're paid to put the whole thing into a eugenics
right.
framework that facilitates drugging or shocking. And Jerry Marzinsky himself said that he had to surrender his license because he can't practice spiritual oppositional energy techniques to those kinds of horrific negative messages and still be in the APA. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it if you want to really get an idea of how deep this visceral assault on people goes. And when you're on the other end of that, it's not fun because now
No,
that you've got these people that have shown that they don't respect you, they don't respect your experiences, they don't want to communicate with you, they want to box you in and label you. That's what they get paid to do. It's not helpful to you. It's not going to give you what you need to get over the challenges that you're facing. It's going to tell you that you're perpetually broken. I mean, it's almost like another demonic tape player. I could almost,
it is.
add a
Yes.
lot of those psych messages onto that list of lies that Jerry Marzinsky has put out there and go, this is the same flippin' thing.
Oh
Because
yeah.
devaluing, it's, making fun of, there's hardly anything about that that's not belittling to somebody.
Yeah, they are doing in essence, like if you see somebody, and when people are just even doing street drugs, okay, because and I know in my case, for one, being autistic and the overwhelm is muchness. Um,
Hmm.
But even without that, even because of the severe trauma that I had from
Right.
childhood, and you see this obviously in a lot of people, this is really what will kickstart somebody into, doing drugs because they're wanting to deal with something. But the
Mhm.
pseudoscience of psychiatry, they enhance that. They enforce that. So instead of sitting down with somebody and allowing them to say and giving them the space to feel their feelings and allowing them to cry, allowing them to find ways of processing it that's healthy, that doesn't involve chemicals and exogenic sources, that
Mhm.
allows them to feel it and heal it and move on from it and say, well, what did you get from this? So that way they're not going to be tempted to reach for something else. And
Right.
all the pseudoscience of psychiatry does is leave people trapped, traumatized, further scared, scarred, and enslaved to
Mhm.
their drugs and their lies and their billing, and saying, well, you have to come in and the only thing you can talk to is a therapist. No, fuck right off. You know what? I need to talk to somebody who understands the things that I've been through, who can at least give me a bounce off a practical idea to me, or in my case, just leave me be. I know enough about philosophy,
Right.
religion. I pray, I meditate, I work, I work out, I clean the house, I like cooking, I certainly talk to my roommates. Everything else, just leave me to deal with the enormous the trauma I've been through is so fucking enormous, and it was needless and it was
Mhm.
intentional, and allow me to process that because it was a fucking nightmare in hell.
Yeah.
And that's even without having the brain damage from the electrocution, and that's even without having the harm, the incredible intentional harm from those goddamn neurotoxic poisons. And I'm so angry about that, but let me heal.
Yeah.
I'm doing great. I'm processing all that. I'm moving on. I understand how to integrate the spiritual experiences I've had, things that now make sense about what was going on. I knew that I was here to help stop the second Holocaust, and that's exactly what's been
Mhm.
happening and what's been going on for the past decades at this point, really, quite
Yeah.
truthfully. And I know that now, and now I feel very comfortable with that. I feel comfortable with the things that I've gone through because I know I set that up with God. And that makes me okay with it. I don't
Mhm.
have any kind of suicidal ideation anymore. I may be upset about the things that I've gone through, but I also, it's like they say in Zen Buddhism about letting go of expectation. My expectation is every day I let things go. I do my workout. I enjoy what the things I have. I look forward to reading things. I look forward to doing things. Even if
Mhm.
bad memories come up, I have the confidence that I can deal with that and put it into perspective. I think, let me pick up my pen. Let me pick up where Gord Downey had left off. He was doing very important things with the Cheney Wenjack Gord Downey Foundation. So when I think
Mhm.
about my brain injury and how that kind of connects even in my life as a Tragically Hip fan and as somebody who is Native American, I'm like, you know what? I feel that very, very deeply. Like that is part of my journey as well. So I always pick up my pen and think, how can what I write help somebody today?
Right.
So I have very much just a peace. It's the peace that surpasses all understanding, as we've talked about, and that is such a beautiful thing. And to me,
Mhm.
it's like I look forward to doing things, and I know that if something comes up, I can overcome it. I know that I I feel very comfortable and very confident, and I want to be able to use myself as an example to help other people,
Right.
and to build frameworks that are understanding of neurodivergent folks, of people who are deprescribing, of people who want to do keto, live a healthy lifestyle, get away from their addictions. I know that, like I said, I've got 2 years plus clean time at this point. I know
Mhm.
that I can, be that and do that and help
Sure.
facilitate that in a way that makes sense. So I I'm good with that. I'm comfortable. I look forward to the disclosure that's happening because I have
Yeah,
an understanding of all that as well, in a very practical sense, as well as in the more spiritual and cosmic sense, and how plasma and the ether connects all of us. And it's just
right.
a lot of things that I feel can help bring people to a greater understanding that we are each individual pieces of God, and that's to be respected. That's to be protected. Our
Hmm.
bodily autonomy is to be respected and protected, as our human rights are.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't think of anything that was more, nobody messes with you than life on the other side. I mean, everything was
Yes.
pure choice and there was no consent, nothing happened. I mean, that's
Hmm.
what it was. And so all the contexts were completely different. I ended up getting one of those books that Jerry Marzinsky mentioned in that interview that I posted. And some of the stuff I can kind of agree with the guy. There are some things that are eerily consistent with my experience, and there's some things I don't agree with. But it's still, I think the guy lived in the 1700s, so I'm not saying that all the translations are right and we're up to speed and I know everything. This is not. I'm not looking for congruence through somebody else. But what I'm saying
Right.
is, it's the dialogue that allows us to get there. I mean, yeah, you can. I might talk in Old Testament terms, but don't associate me with an Old Testament Southern Baptist,
Yes.
um, you know, backwood Alabama kind of a thing. That's not
Right.
what this is.
Right.
There was a lot of empowerment, nothing but empowerment, but without really acknowledging that these transformative events do happen. They're natural occurrences. They need to be studied so we can understand the pathways that provoke these things, because once we start understanding that, then we understand how people get relief from all this trauma like you're talking about. And what you're carrying still, if you're not allowed to do your spiritual expressions and talk about how you have to do these energy and motion things, this is what you're doing to offset the pain that you're suffering. That's what we're trying to explain to people.
Yes.
And to doing that gets really relatively easy, and it makes all your fear go away. There's all kinds of massive emotional benefits from what we're talking about, as opposed to what a label or some ancient memory or some historical thing, or what you might see on TV or a televangelist or something like that. This is not anything like any of that. It kicked the crap out of me. It
Yeah.
literally was like getting hit by lightning. I mean, you
Yes.
I don't think you walk out of an event like that biologically the same as when you walked into it. Well, certainly it healed me in ways that the medical industry has never been able to. So that brought that whole thing back. So that wasn't impossible to understand anymore. But does it take a long time to process? Yes, and especially when you don't know it can happen. So the more we
Right.
run around gaslighting people about this is a disease, it's brain chemical malfunction, it's something of that nature, instead of realizing people are maybe sticking one foot into an adjacent spiritual state, and you can walk them out of that, and you can help them make a lot of meaning out of that, and you can help them get rid of a lot of trauma by not pathologizing it, by not treating them like they're crazy, by not saying that you have to have medical custody of this person because somehow they're going through an emergency. No, they're having a pretty perfectly normal reaction to abnormal social and economic and spiritual
For
pressures
real.
is what they're having. And we don't want to see it that way. We want to do it a different way, which isn't helping anybody. So I still, I'm continue to be amazed that we have no reform in this supposedly evidence-based industry that can't show me a whole lot of evidence for why it should be so hostile to spiritual expression. Show me evidence as to why the things that were said about me in the courtroom were actually necessary or even accurate, for that matter. This was word salad and gibberish and garbage, and
Yeah.
the majority of it. Explain to me how that costs a person their civil rights. Explain to me this profit picture that goes on by
Mhm.
turning someone into a permanent, pharma victim. There's a whole bunch of behind the scenes things that happen. I mean, you have flat out fraud going on with you, and the
Oh,
more
yeah.
this medical fraud is starting to get uncovered, who's got their fingers in the middle of it and they still haven't got to them yet is the entire psych industry, because that is the religion of the intelligence services. That
That's
is the thing that they use to attack spiritual practices. That is the thing that they use to normalize lying. We should all be just morally repulsed at
yeah.
people who get up and lie to us,
Yeah.
deliberately lie to us.
Yeah.
When we should not even be afraid to express that. But what are most people afraid to express? Moral revulsion at people who lie. Just look at our political system. That's why it's so completely flipping broken.
Well, and you know what? I mean, it's a lot of like I said, this is all Rockefeller's wet dream because it's how to do a
Hmm.
lot of flash and dazzle, keep people
Yeah.
fighting against one another under false circumstances as they pick the pockets clean and pull the
Hmm.
strings. That's what that is. It and I, you can see it clearly going on for certainly the entire 20th century, and now, and up through now. They want to invent evidence, they want to invent
Hmm.
things, and it really is just simply about profiteering. It is about fraudulent control. It is about propaganda and lies. Um,
Hmm.
and that's all that the pseudoscience of psychiatry is. It's eugenics and it's propaganda and it's profiteering and it is an unearned control. It's fraud, and they know this, and they know this is being exposed, and this is why, even Jefferson had questions about a two-party system, and what he feared has actually really come to fruition. I mean, we have a tricameral government, so that things like
Yeah.
what we're seeing with this fraudulent, corrupt corporate ownership of two parties, by a lot of fraudsters behind the scenes and a lot of paid profiteers. They don't want third party candidates out there. Shit, that's what part of why Teddy
Hmm.
Roosevelt had the assassination on his life, and
Yeah.
undoubtedly this is why Perot was not elected. That's who I voted for, and that's
Me
when NAFTA
too.
got in, and you see how things got exponentially worse regarding this whole fraudulent globalization thing. It really
Hmm.
has become this shell game of shifting money and pretending like they're going to do something but really not. It is a whole lot of performative politics. It's very,
Yes.
very tiring. um, and people know it. When we had the whole Occupy Wall Street movement, that was when I really thought, man, we're going to get the ball rolling on we the people really getting back together with this and coming up against who's really doing this whole, scheming and scamming and frauding with everybody's futures between, real estate
Yeah.
and the stock market, which is nothing but smoke and mirrors anyway. And I really thought that was, but they infiltrated just like COINTELPRO did with the whole movement, back in the
Hmm.
60s and in the 70s with the counterculture. It's the same kind of thing.
Oh yeah. It
You
all
And
gets infiltrated. Anything successful is
yes,
going to get infiltrated and derailed if anybody can do
yes,
it. That's what they'll do.
it
And
is.
it's not a conspiracy. I mean, this is historically, you can see it. You can see where
Yeah,
deliberate attempts are made to move society in certain directions, and they use concerted. You can almost see the playbook come out. I mean, the
yeah,
chemical imbalance theory is a great example because you can see when that happened. You can go to Google Engrams and you can see the skyrocketing use of anti-theistic type terminology. It was about the time that all the Jurassic Park type movies were coming out and that type of thing. It was a whole bunch of, oh, you're nothing, oh, you're nothing but a, blah, blah, blah. And then we had the implosion of the televangelist scandal, which further stuck another knife in Christianity's back, as if it needed any more than it's already
sure.
gotten from the crazy way that we've treated that stuff in our society.
Oh yeah.
So, it really did get into a level of chaos there, but there's still no, since having these experiences, I look at it and I say, there's no excuse for not exploring this scientifically as they claim to be exploring their labels and their votes scientifically, which we know there isn't any there.
Yeah.
But you know,
It's
we
a weaponization of spirituality. It's a weaponization of
Mhm.
people having a genuine spiritual experience, and they know that's what they're doing. This is part of why, Hopkins, once again, folks with the MK Ultra and all this, it really is a direct line from Nazis to that. They really were trying to get ahead of the spiritual awakening. It had been predicted,
Mhm.
and certainly we've had the CIA in with the consciousness studies. Listen, there were at least two people killed in plane crashes in the 70s who wanted to speak up about it. And I knew about one. God, I'm actually having a weird feeling in my stomach talking about this, because one had actually come to me and said, tell them. And I thought it was about just my own personal experience, but it's about all of this. It's about how they've been weaponizing it,
Wow.
because these are folks that had, this gentleman in particular had actually worked for the government. So he knew what was
Mhm.
going on behind the scenes and was horrified by the whole MK Ultra thing, by what they were doing with
Right.
trying to weaponize spirituality and the power of God. He was horrified. He was a gentleman of God. He was very much a devout Catholic, and that just, it just broke his heart. So of course, and then we had a gentleman named Itzhak Benioff that had written a couple books. One of them's Brief Tour Through Consciousness. Um, the other one is, I actually have it behind me. But there is, he was also unfortunately unalived in a plane crash. But his wife had taken and sort of explained a lot of it and was carrying on
Mhm.
his work and making appearances, and like I say, the books are available out there. So it isn't as though, and to the CIA, of course, wanted to bury that with Monroe Institute and really weaponize it with the remote viewing and everything that we do know about reverse engineering
Yeah.
alien craft and consciousness. Um,
Mhm.
that's a part of it too. That's why Dr. Stephen Greer has been very outspoken about a lot of these things. Um, so we're seeing that all kind of converge, and they know that their false narratives are falling apart, and undoubtedly people are going to be horrified. And as far as how the Pentagon has been misusing funding and other things, certainly since the 80s. I mean, when we
Oh.
had the $500 hammers and whatnot, you'd really think that at some
Oh
point
yeah.
somebody would have got the black ops stuff under control and looked at how much corporate welfare and all this is in those pork in those bills. And that's again been going on for decades. It's not new. It's just time it comes to a complete stop.
Yeah, I think it's getting really, really hard to hide the fact that these things are all banker wars. I think you know, you can't really
Yes.
look at this and look at the facts and any of the conflict zones going on right now and come to the conclusion that it's really much more than that. I mean, this is a fight for to steal resources from people that don't own them, or you know, steal resources from other people that do own them. And what's it going to get us in the end, long run? Absolutely nothing. It's we know this. We're going down the same old road, same old pathway, and I think this time it's going to turn out a lot different than what we may have been expecting in the past. And we'll see how we react to that. But I can tell you, I feel like the only thing that's going to get us out of the trouble that's coming our way is you know, just a rebirth of these immersive spiritual experiences, understanding the pathways, working on those, having people go through that and start. I mean, once you have that thing, I guess I tried to touch on it today where I said, you know, on the other side, wealth was just a thing that went
Yeah.
along with the presence of God. I mean, and it was everywhere. It wasn't
Yes.
you know, it was creating and sharing abundance mentality. There wasn't any impoverishment. Nobody would, if you were impoverished, then it was your own fault. That was something that you were wanting to experience on your own. There was no reason for it, you know, and everybody was doing things to contribute to this environment. It didn't get created for them, right? It wasn't a bunch of
All
servants
right.
or anything. So I mean, it's just people living. What's the matter with that? I kind of like living. I don't know. Some people don't, but I kind of like it. I've
I
had a
do
lot of fun
too.
with it. So,
Yeah. If we go back to a barter system where everybody's able to creatively contribute in ways that are sensible for the gifts that we are each given by God, and each of us has
mhm.
our own unique energy signature, our own unique eternal energy, our own gifts, our own talents that we should be allowed to share freely. And nobody
Yeah.
should be suffering. This false construct of money anyway should have just disappeared a long time ago because it does nothing but cause problems. It's a false energy, and it really isn't. One way I've always said it's far better to pay attention than it is to pay money. And I think
Mhm.
maybe when people can start wrapping their head around, actual values, life values, as opposed to values, you know what I mean?
We can do a lot better.
Absolutely. There shouldn't be this kind of imbalance, and it's a false construct. This whole,
Hmm.
it's just a very false construct, and it just allows too many people who have this and these phony baloney hedge funds. And BlackRock is the one who's sponsoring these wars. I mean, it may as well just come up on the screen, whenever they report about something. Brought to you by BlackRock, brought to you by Vanguard, because
Oh
that's
yeah.
exactly what this is. And it's the
And
same thing with big harm, I might add, and the same thing with the pandemic at that. You
well,
know,
yeah. I mean, they all benefit the same banks,
yes,
right?
they do.
So, and it's about
Yes,
keeping the control of the fight. And yeah, that is a tremendous amount of leverage. It's allowed America to live way above its means for a long, long time.
yes,
And we got out of this notion. We kind of, I think, lost sight of this idea that we do have to work to create a
yeah,
society of abundance, and then we can share it. That hoarding is really nothing to brag about. And I think, but again, I got to say that without that immersive experience of the vast majority of what I'm talking about today, I wouldn't I wouldn't comprehend it. I wouldn't know what the heck Mike Hessler's talking about if I wasn't me who's gone through this. So that's kind of one of the hard things about trying to convey it all and getting back to the point where we start having that again, having those experiences commonplace again. But when we're in a state right now where we can barely talk about it without getting pathologized and potentially kidnapped, and definitely hauled into a courtroom where your civil rights are not even close to being respected, or your wishes or anything else, no matter how coherent you are, um, there's an industry that's been built to take all that away from you,
yeah,
and it it's if I would have gone along with what they were trying to tell me, that would have been the most disempowering thing that I ever could have done in my entire life. There was absolutely nothing about the soup to nut to got in to got out experience. And I never really got out because once you're labeled, this is a permanent thing, they start spreading rumors around. And then immediately, once that happened, you notice a flip change in the relationship between you and medical professionals.
oh
Everything you
yeah,
say is suspect. So
yeah,
now you can't, you're talking about a practice that really relies on discernment, honest conversation, and now you're being excluded from having honest conversation because there's a label that makes sure that that's not going to take place. And especially when that stigma gets wrapped around spiritual experiences because you have to use these aren't timid experiences. So when we
no,
started off talking about Paul needing, almost a dozen years or so to process everything before he went out and said, "Go ahead, I'm dying for this one. This is it. Everything's on the line," and he just tore into it. That knowing what he's going to face, knowing you're going to get all the pushback, knowing you're getting thrown in prison, knowing you're getting stoned, knowing all that's going to happen to you because it's built into as we've been trying to talk about through this, unless you renounce that freedom to lie, you're keeping this hatred inside of yourself that then you just project off onto other people, which that gets turned into a normalized patterns in society, and you see these societies sit around preying on people, and you got to break that up.
yeah,
So what we're saying is we can't. we're still to the point where we can't even explore that pathway because it's still too pathologized, and we're dealing with an industry that refuses to reform. It won't reform. They're not even going to look at it. They've had
That's
plenty of
why
time.
we have to have the exposure, and that's what's important. And to me, I don't have any anger at particular individuals. I have it at the whole fucking system, because the whole system is rotten. And I
Yeah.
don't have any violence about myself. I mean, I do work out at least once a day with weights and
Mhm.
everything too. So yeah, I mean, I don't, I wouldn't have any problem defending myself, taking self-defense classes and all too. Got no problem with that. But
Yeah.
I'm not an aggressor. I feel confident that I know I can defend myself, and I feel that not only physically but mentally and spiritually.
Yeah.
And when you look at, as we've been talking about, the seven churches and the seven deadly sins and that kind of confrontation, Jesus also says, "Forgive 7 times, 7 times." So it's once you have made that confrontation that you can let that anger portion of it go, and then
Hmm.
direct that energy towards change. And
Yeah.
that's where I'm at. It's like a energy of wanting to build frameworks are the that are there, because the rest of this is going to collapse, and I'm very
Yeah.
grateful for that. So let's have in place a framework that works, that makes sense, led by those of us with lived experience, that is based upon a spiritual, a lot of ancient and indigenous traditions, the pre-Rockefeller healthcare, that's based upon natural plants, that's based upon roots and herbs and nutrition, and being, getting away from all this manufactured
Hmm.
nonsense. Local eating, locally grown, locally sourced, and it's a lot of things too that we hear about in the Make America Healthy Again movement. So it really does fit in very nicely with that.
Yeah.
And it's been needing to happen for a while. And I'm glad that, again, that we have all this about deprescribing, about getting away from that model of medicine coming up at this
Hmm.
point. And I don't doubt that in the back of Bobby Kennedy's head, that he's actually thinking about his Aunt Rosemary, who was lobotomized. I mean, that's horrible. And I'm sure that he feels a particular way about that, and would like to see changes happen. So I'm very grateful he's in a position of power for this too.
Hmm.
But I really don't believe in coincidence. So I think there's very much, again, as we set up our lives with God pre each incarnation, I don't doubt um, that there's a big part of why he's in place as health secretary, and I don't think we could have a better champion for a lot of these things. Um,
Yeah. I just hope he's able to use it wisely and,
you know,
get some stuff done in spite of all the opposition. The best thing that they really have going for him is the visibility, which we don't have, and a lot of the survivors don't have. We don't have that visibility. We don't have advocates. We don't have people that are saying, "Hey, we need to quit treating this class of people in this manner." And that's why when it comes to forgiveness, my attitude when it comes to the psych industry is like, you guys aren't even asking for forgiveness. You're out there, you got the pedal to the metal going in the
yeah.
same damn direction, and you do it all over again. If it happened to me today, the same, and they could get away with it, sure they would. It'd be the same flipping thing all over again. There's no reform.
Well, that
They
fraud is in the
and
billions, and I'm glad it's being exposed. I'm glad they're seeing that it's right there in the
mhm,
so-called behavioral health. And I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar money laundering and fraud. So I'm very, very glad that that is also part of what's happening, because then we can
mhm,
say, listen, what you're doing is eugenics. You're following eugenics. I know y'all don't want to be another Nazi state. I mean, and I think this is part of what needs to be confronted too. So I'm glad it's coming to the surface. And that's where I think those of us within the disability community, brain injury community, psych injured community,
Hmm.
those of us who deal with it, such as lupus and other autoimmune, can really come together and have a very strong, solid coalition to come against
Yeah.
modern day Action T4 and make sure that we can speak up and out about the things that we can contribute, things that we do know, the spiritual
Hmm.
aspects of things, and how we are very much contributors to community. And how we can do that to make that a stronger thing. And again, to address all this fraudulence with the banks, with the foreign owned real estate, get these REITs out of here, allow things to be community owned again, bring back co ops, bring back things that are locally owned and operated. It is a necessity. That's
Hmm.
another part of this fraud and fraudulence and what's really driving homelessness. I'm tired of hearing the false narrative around, oh, well, drug addicts or mental illness. Mental illness doesn't exist.
Right.
Poverty does.
It
So
does.
let's address the poverty issue, because when you have AI taking up jobs, when you have jobs where wages are not keeping a pace to be able to afford even the basics in life anymore, and that's been happening again for decades, certainly since we started seeing jobs being exported
Hmm.
out of America, manufacturing disappearing, and that's when all of this started to increase. So let's look at the real narrative, not the false narrative being presented by the Wall Street elites and the WEF,
Right.
but the real thing, the real deal, and let's actually take these problems head on. Let's start manufacturing things again, allowing people to contribute, bring the call centers back here. There are so many people who would have been thrilled for many years to be working in a call center that, you
There's
know,
a yeah.
yeah,
There's lots of ways people can
oh,
contribute,
yes,
and
yes,
we can do this. I know we can do it. I think that we've just built a predatory kind of system that just goes after the individual to the point where it's,
yeah,
we're impoverishing a whole segment of population so a handful of people can hoard like crazy.
yes.
And I don't know why we're putting up with this. These people don't contribute and not in my mind, I don't see them contributing in proportion to what they're hoarding. So
Not at all.
I'm
Not at
I'm not
all.
a person that says let's confiscate wealth. But on the other hand, I'm saying we don't need to make it to the point where the average person can't get capital, where, there's so many obstacles to even starting a business. We got to get out of this. We absolutely did try and create more monopolies. We did change laws
Yeah,
that drove more big companies because we wanted to be in charge of the world. So we needed much bigger companies than we had. That's why they did that. And it's been an absolute disaster. And the trickle down has been a disaster. We can do a trickle up
yeah,
economy that makes sure everything's taken care of. And we're not, and I think we'll be the first people to recognize the fact that there's a number of people in the disabled community that are there because they're selfish, they're self-hating. They have a number of problems that they refuse to address, that they feel that they're going to make their problems your problems. And, we're not
yeah.
excusing those people in any way, shape, or
Right.
form. What we argue against is a system that pretends to have answers that doesn't, that's coercive beyond
Right.
reason when it doesn't need to be, that has created space for psychopaths to go in, barge
Sure.
into somebody's healthcare like they know what they're doing, and just start sprinkling drugs and trying this modality and accusing this way and accusing that way. Hang this label, that label doesn't work. Hang that label doesn't work. And just bilking the Medicare system, whether you're doing it with legal billings or you're just flat out ripping it off by pretending you're doing all that and really not doing it to anybody. I don't know what the difference is, quite frankly. I'm not sure which one
There
is.
in one.
I think I have more respect for the people that outright steal it, because the people that are, going through these fake phony processes and doing that crap to people, they've got to have been doing it long enough to realize that they're marginally effective at best. And then you look at the damage and the way they harm people, the way they harm society, the way their ideology is. where what are you doing for us with all the money that you're taking and the courts that you've corrupted and that type of thing? I don't see it. I don't see them as being helpful at all to the challenges that we're facing today. I see them as obstructive, really.
Yeah. It's a depopulation agenda. There is no decent purpose to be served, and if people are really looking at it and looking at who's profiteering off of people's poverty, who's
Hmm.
profiteering off pain, and who is just profiteering off of, people who are elderly, children, the disabled, and it's sickening.
Hmm.
It really is just simply eugenics fraud
Yep.
and profiteering, and it needs to stop, and it's run like organized crime. And when you think there's a direct line from the ones who used to own the tobacco companies, then went into junk food, then went into big pharma, and if you look at that movie The Insider, I mean, the way that we've been treated is no different than how Russell Crowe was treated in that movie, and the gentleman in real life who was the insider who was coming up against the tobacco companies. There's no difference. That man
Hmm.
was being persecuted using mob tactics, and really, how is Harma, Big Harma, any different than any other drug dealer in organized crime? They're not. They're the
No.
same thing. And it's about time that it's viewed that way, because that is really exactly what it is. No
No.
difference. No
They
difference.
bought their own. The difference is they bought their own courtroom. Whereas, the
Yeah,
cartels have bought the Mexican courtrooms and the pharma
yes.
executives in North America bought the American courtrooms. So yeah, I mean, what's the difference? They're still,
Yeah.
anyway, I could go on and on, but I won't. I just
Yeah.
won't.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're kind of getting up into an hour. Any last thoughts on your end?
I think we're really seeing a lot of progress getting made. I really feel like a lot of this exposure is happening of this fraud and fraudulence. I mean, I know what I reported has been bearing fruit. I know a lot of that rotten fruit has been coming to bear as far as all this. So I'm glad it's happening. I'm
Mm,
grateful that you and I can have these discussions and help build a framework and help give a voice to people like ourselves to be able to
yeah,
say, listen, we have solid ideas. We're not here to profiteer. We're here to actually support people who want to do good, who are proactive in
hmm,
maintaining a spiritual practice and in maintaining good health, and doing things that are really on the right side of things, that are on the moral side of things.
yeah.
And so I'm glad we're seeing the exposure happening at the same time the disclosure is. There's no coincidence in life. None.
No, no. But we do have to keep pushing because we know all this stigma is interfering with other people's ability to experience what we have. So as long as we're having to, do this with our hands behind our backs or halfway in handcuffs or under threat or under duress, really, we got to keep pushing until that is gone. And, we're not the ones that created that stigma. That's the psych industry that did it. And, they're the ones that need to uncreate that stigma. And since they're not going to, I guess we're just going to keep fighting until, as long as we're breathing. So that
Yep.
there
Well,
you
we're
go.
going to see it collapse. We're going to see it
Mm,
collapse. We've already started to see it, and they are so desperate at
yeah.
this point and grasping at straws. So, and we'll be here to really build something that actually works, that is actually
Yeah.
respectful of people and their experiences.
I completely agree. All right. So with that, I hope you have a great week.
You
I'll get
too,
this
Juan.
together, get it out there, and we'll see you next week.
All righty. Have a good one. God
You
bless.
too.
Enjoy.
Same to you. God bless you. Take care.
You too,
Bye
Juan.
bye.
Bye.